oh, if you're doing Bengal, why don't you do Odisha? It's like an underdog. It's such a beautiful state. And I was like, I'm not a very religious kind of person. And I had this thing about Odisha that it's one of the major religious sites in India for the Jagannath temple, famously, but that's the coastal part. When I started reading about it, I realized that this is the state, and and before this I had not known. Obviously, reading does help. I had not known that Odisha is one of the states in India with the highest concentration of vulnerable tribes. Like out of the 62 listed in India, around 32 or 30, if I'm not wrong, are in a single state of Odisha, making
That's
it highly interesting.
Hi everyone, welcome to Now Boarding, a travel podcast by me, Payal Nair. This show aims at creating awareness about ecotourism, sustainable tourism, responsible travel, and a lot more. We will cover stories and journeys of people who are ecotourism specialists and those who are leaders in their field. We will also be talking to people who have had unique travel experiences, remarkable conceptual places to stay, unexplored cultures, and ancient histories of various towns and cities around the world. Join me in this journey of knowing more about travel. Get inspired to see the world and discover your inner self. Hi everyone. Today I am in conversation with Kavya Saxena. Kavya is the curator of Craftpotli. She's a social entrepreneur. She's got an amazing repertoire. I have to, I will not do justice if I don't introduce her with everything. So she grew up in a traditional family, but she has carved a very different path for herself. She has hold your breath. She has a passion for motorsports. She's a corporate coach. She's a risk taker. She says she's a seeker, and I have to understand more about that. She has an intense love for Indian villages, and in fact, now she lives in and operates out of the hinterlands of Koraput forests in Odisha and is working with some of the most vulnerable tribes of India. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kavya.
Thank you so much, Payal. Such a beautiful thing. In fact, I was like looking at I'm like, yeah, I want to be here. I should be here.
Thank you.
So,
Thank
but I'm
you.
also so glad that we met. It's the best
I
thing
mean,
about internet.
I
People
know, seriously, at the moment it's a virtual
so
meet,
great.
but I'm sure at some
Absolutely.
we will meet personally as well. So, Kavya, can you share with
Absolutely.
us your journey from growing up, as you've said, in a traditional family to becoming a social entrepreneur?
Okay. Yeah, looks like a decade has passed. In fact, a decade has passed. So I was born out of, first of all, hi everyone, whosoever is hearing this podcast. Such a fab job Payal is doing,
And
and
thank
all
you.
the wishes that the series grows further. And I was born in Rajasthan to a huge family. Like my father has 10 brothers and sisters. It's a massive family with a lot of lineage and a very traditional approach to life. Like there are these check form in Indian communities and societies that structure your life, even expectations. I would say that at a certain age you do this, at a certain age you should do this, and you get financially secure. Not that I am not, but then like you have to satisfy all of those checklists. So I was coming from that background where the expectations were definitely high, and also I was like, I can say that I was a good kid. Like when I say good, I was like, okay, getting good marks in my school and college, and like an obedient child. Not that I'm a rebel now, but then everything was like going fine till I got to my MBA, picked up human resources. My major has been human resources and industrial relations. Got picked up by one of the biggest Fortune 500 of India, Indian Oil. Got my first job just out of an interview, and parents were delighted. They were elated. Oh, finally, our daughter has just found her ground, and this is what we wanted. And I started working, and that, like my first job, thankfully, made me travel because massive organization. I was working in Mumbai, then Hyderabad, and Delhi in a span of about good 8 years. But by that time, I was like, probably the energies and the thoughts I have can't be contained in a traditional public sector company, as much as I'm so thankful for the kind of foundation they've built for me as a professional. And that was the turning point. While a lot of Indians still vie for government jobs, especially jobs that are high paying, like Indian Oil and ONGs, like oil companies, I resigned from that job to pursue my career ahead in hospitality, retail, fashion. And that kind of really changed my outlook from a middle management corporate person to suddenly heading small, medium sized brands that have pan India presence. Some are even sourcing textiles from Uzbekistan and Bhutan, and opened up my eyes towards the different things that a professional should grow with. Like I was also looking at finances, balance sheets, not just HR like my domain. And when all of this was happening since beginning, I have this love for crafts, for everything handmade, for Indian villages, for stories. And I think much before Facebook, Instagram, everything came, I used to write blogs and I used to travel with my job all the time, all my life. All of my life I've done that. Even before Internet of Things never existed, I still remember. But then I think all of it kind of culminated when COVID was happening. We were all discovering each other, also discovering one inside of us, what we really want. And I think that was my turning point. I was like, if I really love villages, what am I doing in a posh golf course high rise in Gurgaon? I should rather be in villages, but let's just do a litmus test. That is my weekend travel equal to something that can turn into a full time passion? And yeah, that's where I put all of my skills that I was learning as a like motorsports, how to fix cars, how to drive in rugged terrains, to also being in villages. I took this journey called Kavya on Quest, which was one of a kind 8 month long solo expedition where I never stayed in a hotel, never took a guide. I was just driving in remote parts of the country, documenting villages, their art forms, and putting it out.
How did you identify, because India is such a vast region, so how, or country, so how did you identify which areas or which states you wanted to go to? Was there a lot of research involved, or you just decided to go with the flow?
I would say that definitely past experience. Like I was telling you this little bit, that I was anyway traveling for hobby with my jobs on weekends. But with this journey, which was like longish, also involved me putting my savings and everything. What I did was that India is vast. It's so big that you can't cover in a lifetime, I feel. So what I thought was that since my domicile is mostly north, I was exposed to more north, and plus my studies was in south, so I was again exposed to a bit of southern India. But then there was this eastern India, like beyond Bengal. If you move around the states of Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and of course the northeastern part leading up to Bhutan, Arunachal, Meghalaya, Nagaland. And I was like, I have gone there, but in bits and pieces. I haven't really traveled extensively as much as I would say to Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh or Karnataka. And while the journey was involving 1 month in every state, I decided I'm going to start with eastern part of the country, which is my not my comfort zone and will make me learn quite a bit more than the familiar places. So yeah, with that and obviously a bit of research, I went into reading some kind of thesis, because when you Google about craft spaces or villages, there's hardly any authentic info. Like you will never get contact numbers of a certain artisan easily. So yes, that bit there, of course, internet, Instagram really, really helped me. And definitely I had to go through a lot of papers written by students, design students.
I've heard you've mentioned in somewhere on while I was researching you, I heard you say that a lot of people don't know the difference between tribal and rural. So
Correct.
if you can help in making me and the people who are listening and who are going to be watching on YouTube understand what is the definition of rural versus being not being tribal.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate that I'm talking about it. Also, not sure if I can say that is a definitive definition, because it's open to, but mostly I won't say it's open to interpretation, but let's say if we just stick around fact, it's as simple as understanding developed and underdeveloped economies. Like in the world, there are certain countries that are categorized as developed basis of GDP or economic growth that they've achieved after a certain point. It can be world war or certain time stamp, and it's exactly similar to that. When we consider rural, they have a certain GDP. Also, the native communities there primarily survive on agriculture, which is organized, which means that there is a certain amount of effort, tilling, machinery going into that. And the income sources are organized around a local area, which means that let's say we take village X. So village X would be using a bit of earth to do organized farming, taking a bit of the excess forest produce to develop into something. It can be a lotion, an oil. They would be using certain crafts. However, tribal communities are categorized as more sometimes fully to partly dependent on forests and foraging. Their incomes do not come from agriculture, their incomes do not come from craft selling or any kind of organized product. Now, even in this, there can be categories like the area that I live is under a vulnerable tribal belt, which means that, let's say, if there are five tribes identified, these five individually have less than 10,000 members surviving. That's when you categorize a tribe as particularly vulnerable tribal group, which makes it highly endangered. That, okay, if they don't survive, then this tribe is gone. So extra protection under acts is taken care. But I would say in simple language, in nutshell, tribal people are still forest dependent. They still believe in the powers of forest, whether it's healing, medicine, food, their houses, to their incomes. And rural, of course, is using the local area to generate an organized income.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sort of categorizes the two quite clearly. And like you've said, it's also interpretation, but
Yes.
that clearly is your interpretation of it. Now,
Yeah.
tell me, so you chose to, after you traveled around the country, how did you identify this particular forest and this particular tribal community to be the one that you wanted to, one, live in, and two, you wanted to create and generate some kind of an income for them? How,
Yeah.
as a social entrepreneur, how did that actually come about? What was the one factor that made you come to this decision?
I had never traveled to Orissa. The language is not known. I don't know the people. I had, for that matter, not traveled to Chhattisgarh. A lot of states I was traveling during this post-COVID journey that I took for my own discovery. And I still remember I was just researching. I was to go to Southern Belt, and someone suggested, "Oh, if you're doing Bengal, why don't you do Orissa? It's like an underdog. It's such a beautiful state." And I was like, I'm not a very religious kind of person. And I had this thing about Orissa that it's one of the major religious sites in India for the Jagannath temple, famously, but that's the coastal part. When I started reading about it, I realized that this is the state, and and before this I had not known. Obviously, reading does help. I had not known that Orissa is one of the states in India with the highest concentration of vulnerable tribes. Like out of the 62 listed in India, around 32 or 30, if I'm not wrong, are in a single state of Orissa, making
That's
it
half,
highly interesting.
that's
Like
half
more
of
than half
the
are living and still following the shamanic traditions, the forest dependency, and even the ways their entire lifestyle, probably just as it was 100 years ago, they still live like that, and it's eroding fast, but that's a separate discussion. So I was just reading about it, and I still remember I crossed my car to enter the border of Orissa via this forest belt. It wasn't the usual landing site of the capital of the state, it was the other side. And I was like, I've traveled all over India, but I've never seen a place like that. I've never seen native communities so raw. I've seen Nagaland, I've seen headhunters, I've seen a lot of images on Google, but I've never seen something like this. And I was like, I was blown away. And a very interesting thing, Payal, which I think probably you should also look at, when James was making Avatar, it's very interesting piece that I came across that time. And Avatar was all about this human conflict with the nature, that how they want to take control of a forest because it's so useful in resources that they wipe out the native population, right? He back then spoke about a forest in India, which was happened to be Orissa, with a tribal community called the Dongriya Kondhas, who were fighting a war against mining giants back then. And he actually wrote that there is a certain tribe in India who is currently facing this exact scenario. Like it's this war between mining and using the forest resources versus claiming the land that is theirs. So it was so interesting that people had that perspective and still these people were living the way they, and for me it was a great learning platform. So I was like, okay, I don't know about my life, but I'm going to spend more time here. And then of course life took its turn.
So now, can you talk a little bit about the turmeric project, Kavya?
Yes, I'm so happy to speak about it. I can talk for 3 hours on turmeric. It's like a baby delivered.
Can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, turmeric is a turnaround. I think it's opened up so much for me as an individual in my own life. It's like in India, turmeric is considered a healing spice. When kids used to fall, traditionally, my grandmoms and all would put a little paste of turmeric, and we used to take it very lightly, never taken it very seriously. We're millennials, we are born in this Volany and all this medical generation. So yeah, this entire belt pile, they grow. First of all, it's mineral rich, the geography that I am. Almost all the Indian mines that are producing bauxite, coal to some extent, also a lot of minerals, I'm not even aware. All the major mines are located in this belt of Orissa, Chhattisgarh, and Jharkhand. It's the soil is red, it's extremely fertile. Like you grow anything, you grow strawberries, it'll rain strawberries. You grow potatoes, it'll rain potatoes. So it's very fertile, the land. And they grow turmeric, they grow coffee. Koraput coffee is now one of the best tribal coffees in India currently for its very good quality Arabica beans. And the turmeric, obviously, it's a low cost raw material. It's not a very, unlike coffee or a cocoa in South. So I was observing this, and what we initially, after observing that there's excess turmeric production, but not enough utilization at a level that can bring some more value to the local tribes. And the local tribe here is called the Kondhas. I'll probably send you the spelling around it if you at all need it. So they were growing it in their backyards, and these are hills. They go like that, slope, may, and they grow avocados, sometimes strawberries, whatever fancies them, they would grow purple sweet potatoes, and a lot of other stuff. So what I thought was, from my previous experience, I had some contact in Delhi, and I reached out to this lady who teaches how to make basic soap bars. And I was like, yeah, people are making aloe soap. We can also make turmeric soap. And they were flown in with my little savings. And I spoke to the local development authority that I need some women to attend it. And let's see what will we do with it later. But I right now just want them to attend this workshop. And for 5 days, we did this workshop to make them understand that at what temperature, what ingredient, how much turmeric to put. They understood how to make soap, and they are extremely smart women. They are walking in the forest every day. They are each and everything, how much, what to touch. They know their raw material best. So we figured out that their learning ability was quite fast, even though they were old. I mean, the entire 102 women that were trained initially ranged from like a 18-year to a 65, 70-year spread of women. So the training happened. And then I did not have any orders. What do I do with that now? So it was like a locked situation that now they have a skill, but they don't know where to utilize. So I'm like, okay, let's make soaps. I'm going to send it to my friends and family. And I just started sending. But the main challenge was again that I'm in a forest. I have to either Amazon some bubble wraps and things like that to my village. Amazon reaches me. So how do I manage that packaging that I'm able to ship it anywhere? So again, these local people came to rescue that, okay, we have recycled यहाँ पे brown paper that traditionally was used to cover sheets for students, little government schools, and we have coconut husk, we have so many things that can be used in a box to give you a bedding. So then we figured, okay, that's a great idea. We don't need to use bubble and things like that, and we can use the local resin as gum, and things evolved very fast from there, Payal. We had a client in Bangalore who one of my cousin gave her the soap. She ended up loving the soap bar because of its purity. I mean, it just has hand pounded turmeric and it has glycerin. That's it. The shelf life is smaller, but it's very pure. The quality of turmeric is also good. And most importantly, where we have really, really made an impact is packaging. We are able to ship our boxes almost worldwide, I can say, because now we are also serving to Guatemala, a UN agency there. It goes without plastic taping, like without a single plastic tape. And how are we able to do that? Is by mobilizing the local ingredients available in that season. So let's say if sal forest leaves are available, they are dried at a particular temperature in the sun, and they have a little volume. They are used as bedding. We would use local brown paper to cover the soap so that the traces of turmeric never touches the box, and then the printing happens locally with a local ink. Everything is very localized. How I was talking about like a rural
Yeah.
economy, we've turned that into a rural economy. And most importantly, the women still go to the forest every morning to forage. Their lifestyle has not changed. So, in a way, we are not forcing these Adivasis to change their routines and become dependent on money, but we are trying to add a layer of independence that tomorrow, if something happens, you have this to rely on. You have a product which was non existent. And then it slowly like built up, the scale built up, the volumes built up. We started being on marketplaces. We decided that like Lush Cosmetics, we will have our women and their faces on every soap bar that goes out of the village. So they were so proud about it. They saw their faces. Imagine for them it was big. They've never even seen their photograph.
Yeah.
From that to a box to people taking, sending us screenshots, sharing review, to going to UN for their rehab projects. We send 5,000 to 7,000 bars every month to Guatemala, and then we started retail in India. Then it became a TIS case study of how these Adivasi women have added a layer of financial security that also protects them from cyclones, natural disasters, generally to add that income as things are changing. So, yeah, and it's still an evolving journey. We still face so many challenges. Sometimes other village would come, they would say, we want to join, you buy this from us. I mean, it's like a journey that I'm still on. It is, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, I can
Like,
imagine. I think the
yeah.
kind of fulfillment you probably get, and for you doing it single-handedly with, but encouraging and motivating the tribal women to help in getting the whole process going, I think is phenomenal. And is that what keeps you grounded and motivated? Do you miss the trappings of an urban lifestyle, or you've now adapted to in a very simple, and as you mentioned, simplicity for the tribal people? Have you incorporated some of that in your life as well?
I miss the pizza outings for sure. I can't deny that. I have to be very honest. I thought about, yeah, I miss the movies. I miss the pizza outings. Sometimes a Friday night beers with friends in Gurgaon. It has a different charm, and sometimes I miss that. Sometimes, but I also feel that I cannot go back to a big city unless there is a situation personally in or professionally or from family side that I need to have a certain amount of monies in bank. Not that we are not making money, we make okay money to rotate in the community. They are getting a month on month return with the turmeric project, which is very gratifying. So number one is I've been able to settle in a village for sure, 200%. If I can be here, I can be in any village in the world. I often think I should be in Sapa in Vietnam or somewhere in Southern Asia, and I can very well adjust. At one point of time, I was thinking, okay, turmeric has reached a certain threshold. I should be in Leh, probably facilitating a pottery community and scaling it up to a dying art form. So 100% village life has I won't say that I don't have my urban vices. I still have a fancy coffee machine in my house, but I also feel that this goes out to every young person who may be listening to your podcast, that you don't need to live hand to mouth to have a grassroots lifestyle, to impact grassroots. You can have what you need as your non negotiables and work your lifestyle around it. For me, let's say a simple good coffee is a non negotiable. So I was like, I'm very sure the first salary I earn, I'm going to put a machine in my house so that I don't miss a cafe coffee. I have to be very honest around this. And second takeaway I feel, which you said, was the standalone bit. It started standalone, Payal, but I think the motivation today is massive. Now, what happened was slowly Taj trained chef, who was a professional chef, left Goa. He was earning very handsomely to come back to Odisha when they heard about our journey. And today he's a critical logistics, almost like a co-founder, but a critical logistics man to the entire operations we do. We cannot survive if the chef is not there. Then what happened when the women the Adivasi women who work with us, their sons and daughters who have gone to urban, smaller towns around this village to study. Normally, what happens is that they would go to some city for a meager urban job. It would be some salon or a parlor or some construction company. They came back to my turmeric project. They would be handling a packaging, someone is doing a QC, another handles website orders, and they have a steady source of income staying in the village and getting the right recognition, which is not an artisan like a QC head,
Yeah.
an inventory head,
Yeah.
which is also very important, that this generation of rural and tribal people need that kind of designation, that kind of power that a lot of other urban people need.
Yeah.
They don't want to be termed as artisans, karigar. So it's like coming to life. Like I could bring a few, but it started like that reverse thing happened with us, that they came back to the village, which was like a power boost, like a papaya spinach shot. Oh my God, this happened.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah.
Your vision is gradually coming to fruition, which is absolutely incredible. You mentioned before we started the interview that they are, because I asked you about power shortages, since there is, in fact, as we speak, there is a cyclonic, yeah, I can hear it, and there's a cyclone brewing, and there's very heavy rain. And I asked you about power outage, and you said that most of the tribal people have solar power, and
Yeah.
therefore, so can you talk a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah. So I also feel that we are living in an age of technology. Everything is connected far more faster than the blink of our eyes. And whether it is government schemes or CSR activities, a lot of mining companies have to extend certain benefits to the areas. Or for that example, tomorrow, if you put up a huge factory near a rural place, you would want to benefit the community, the water that you're drawing. You would want to ensure that I give back in some way once you attain a certain scale. So I would say that usually the benefits that come, and I'll just speak from a point of view of Koraput. I can't comment on the other area. But here, mostly the benefits that accrue to these tribal communities are mostly government driven or coming from solid activities, not particularly us. We can't take credit. But that said, a very important thing to understand, Payal, is also the effect of rapid urbanization. Now, while they are getting solar panels, they are getting a certain incentive to make pakka houses, internet is also penetrating. And once internet penetrates modern generation, they also have smartphones. There's no check that what is right for them to consume, what is bad. They consume everything. So now they also want to have the same aspirate. They want to have the same Coca-Cola. They want to have the same Pizza Hut as we are doing, but they may not have the same pockets. So what would happen is that a version or a fake version of Pepsi would enter the local bazaar and they would consume that for a low So initially how it happened was, I'll give you an example. A village close to Chhattisgarh border, which is the other state bordering Odisha, used to grow pistachios as a very high quality dry fruit,
Yeah.
right? And they would go to this weekly bazaar. And I'm talking about 10 years back when I was not part of this whole ecosystem, but I've heard stories of it. And still today, barter system is there prevalent. I've seen that in my own village, barter system existing. So back then, what happened was that since they were not aware and they were seeing these new things like a detergent bar, they would see a toothbrush, they would see Coca-Cola bottles, they would see these cheap pasta Maggie fakes, and they would trade a 200 gram or a 500 gram of pistachios for a soap bar without realizing
The
what is the
value.
value that they are
Yeah.
trading,
Yeah.
because the middlemen would just trade on their aspirations.
Mhm.
And it was much later, obviously thanks to internet, that they realized that, oh my god, this is got so much value. So today of course things are changing, but I would also say that urbanization in traditional native communities has to have its own checks and balances, which is slowly coming in, I would say, but it has its perils, pros and cons.
Yeah.
But that said, we all are now in a circular generation. I mean, the kids here know how to, they know what is the song trending on Reels, they know what's happening on Craftpotli's Instagram today. If a certain order comes, the women are like, Arey, order gaya, what's the feedback? So everyone is slowly getting connected and things are changing even in these parts of the world.
So the name of your turmeric soap bar is Craft Poli or
No, it's
Craft
called the
Poli
Koraput. Yeah, that's the name of the company. The turmeric
company.
bar is called the Koraput Turmeric Bar. It
Okay.
is after the geography from where the turmeric grows. So
Okay.
Koraput is where we stay, where we grow our turmeric, where the soap bar is made, where the tribe stays. So
What is
the
the
bar.
and what's the name of the tribe?
Kondha. So it is spelled as Kondha, Kondha tribe. And then, of course, Kondha also has sub tribes, but that's one of the dominant tribes in this part, the hilly tribal. They are also called Highlanders because they live in the hills
Right.
of this part of the state. So, yeah.
That's so interesting. Okay. Last, if you have a message for anyone in the audience who's aspiring to make a social impact within India, what kind of a message would you have for them? Because there are a lot,
Um,
I think social impact has become a very crucial and an important conversation with especially the
yeah.
younger generation. Some from your experience, if there is anything that you could add on that would add value and would help them make a decision.
I would say that first, oh my God, first is definitely that this is one of the best times in India to be starting to do something by yourself. There's a lot of support. I would say structural support, government support, to some extent, even funding. Though we are still bootstrapped, we don't look at funding in the way to scale up and make a turmeric factory. We are not looking at that kind of impact. We want to stay global. Like we should make sure that our turmeric bars go outside India, but still it's not as big as it takes away their lifestyle. But I think that message would be that one, India is so huge that today 56% of India is still rural oblique tribal, which gives you massive opportunity. It's not just crafts. You can work in rural economy, in food, in architecture, in traditions, in language, in documenting traditional festivals, reviving certain old things that have died down. I think language is a big area. People don't look at it. Once you lose a language, it's just gone. So I feel that there's so much opportunity for young creative individuals to find their niche and work in rural economy in some way to bring that impact. It can be multi-layered. And I think the opportunities are endless. We can, and nowadays I also feel that rural and tribal areas are not that isolated as it was 50 years ago, where people would go leave a city life. You can still stay connected, be in a comfortable setup while staying at grassroots and making an impact. I would definitely say opportunities like absolutely reigning in rural space. And number two is, I would say, number two is being very objective about it. So a lot of people work, like I see a lot of craft sector enterprises. I also see a lot of social enterprises. It's high time that younger people who enter into rural economies start bringing those numbers, that what is the impact? How many SDG goals have we satisfied? How much of carbon footprint my unit is producing in this part of the forest? How much of local ingredients? Or let's say if I send out a product or if I'm giving a service, what is the carbon footprint that's getting out or getting in? So those numbers are also very important to put out as impact, not just the main body of work. So that is also something that young people, I think, should definitely look at. I don't know if
Fantastic.
that made sense,
No, no,
but
no.
yeah.
It makes absolute sense. It makes absolute sense. I think it's they have to be able to see where there is a lacking, and
Correct.
if they have the expertise to be able to help in empower, I think that is an incredible way to make that social impact. So thank you so much, Kavya. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Now Boarding, a travel podcast. Check out other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. And of course, don't forget to share your thoughts with us. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes only on Now Boarding, a travel podcast.